I'm in my third and final year at Leeds studying philosophy, and recently I was suspended by my student union from Leeds Student Radio, which I've been a member of since the beginning of this year. And it came about because I was elected to be the daytime editor, and that meant that I'd be overseeing Politics Hour, Women's Hour, LGBTQ Hour, and a couple of other shows. They're all talk shows. And I started that role in September, and at the same time, I started my own podcast separate from Leeds Student Radio. Mm-hmm. And on that podcast, I wanted to investigate the rising response to wokeism and identity politics. And the second interview I did, which caused controversy, was with Charlie Bentley-Astor, who, amongst many other things, is a detransitioner, and she took puberty blockers for 4 years. She now has osteoporosis in her spine, doesn't know whether she'll be able to have children. So we were discussing the reality of that and what it was like to be under the influence of gender ideology, which she is now a desister of. And there was backlash to it. People just labelled it as far right, compared me to a rape advocate. One person said to someone who was defending the podcast, would you say that someone who was having a civilised conversation about rape, would you defend their right to have a podcast too? Because the argument was, but she's just having a civilised conversation about this, so what's your issue? And the person who helped me edit that podcast, I credited him because he put so much time into helping me. He had an official warning from a separate society and was told that he must distance himself from my work, and if he didn't, there would be further measures taken. So at that point, I purchased my Free Speech Union membership, and we went to the Battle of Ideas, which is a freedom of speech festival put on by Baroness Claire Fox and the Academy of Ideas, and we actually had media passes to go there as Leeds Student Radio. We advertised the festival, did a ticket giveaway, and at that festival, I did interviews as LSR, but I also did personal interviews for my podcast with Andrew Gold and Graham Linehan. And the interview with Graham went out on the 28th of October. And the day after that, he published an article that I'd written for him on his Substack. And then the following day, I was told that I had been suspended from LSR, from my committee position and as a member, for allegedly putting the health and safety of other students at risk, not acting in a duty of care, and bringing LSR into disrepute. And I was investigated by the student union, and the outcome of the investigation was that the allegations of misconduct were dropped, but I was still permanently removed from my position because I had brought LSR into disrepute, but they didn't tell me what it was I had done to do that. And they had clarified with me that the investigation was not into my right to hold and say gender critical views, but they also asked me, how do you maintain an inclusive environment at LSR considering your views? Mm-hmm. They said, considering your choice to publicly post your views makes some people feel unincluded, how do you maintain an inclusive environment? So They said it wasn't about my views, but also then made it about my views. Yes. So the Free Speech Union is helping me appeal the outcome of that, and that's where I am now.
Obviously, there's a big difference between how you treat people personally and the content that you interview about. I don't think that they need to be related at all. I think you can treat any people with respect and politeness and then have a discussion that they would disagree with on a completely separate platform, and that need not be investigated at all. But what's that been like for you socially and on campus?
Well, I haven't lost any friends, like friends that would matter, but I do know that people don't like me, and I know that there are people who have never met me before who have told others that if they did ever meet me that they would punch me. One person said to my face that they wouldn't agree with it, but they would understand if someone was violent towards me. I don't know what it will be like when I go back to uni after Christmas, so we'll see, but I am conscious of the fact that lots of people won't and don't like me because of my views.
Yeah. That's got to be uncomfortable, I would imagine.
Yes, in a way, but I will die on this hill. So it doesn't bother me because I know that in years to come when we look back, and we will look back at this and think what an absolutely awful medical scandal this is, I can hold my head up high and say I was there saying that it was wrong and you guys all believed in it.
Absolutely. The people that are saying that they would punch you, do you think they will?
No, of course they won't. I mean, if they did, I have a lot of respect for them. Fair enough. Obviously, I would not like to be punched, but if they actually followed through on their words, which people so often don't, fair enough, I guess.
Yeah, I had a similar experience during lockdown. Someone who I used to be very, very good friends with posted something on Twitter saying that she would like to bring back the death penalty herself on people like me, and my only reaction was, I would love to see her try.
I know.
Yeah. So in school, in secondary school, I went to a grammar school, which typically are very left-leaning, kind of ironically, because the left want to abolish grammar schools. But I do feel that environment sort of influenced me, not necessarily to believe things, but to think that I believe things. Was that similar for you at your school?
Absolutely. I mean, I went to a private school, and I would say that the culture, from what you tell me and what people who are at grammar schools tell me, is similar in the sense that I think there is this middle class guilt, and they want to, because they don't have many oppression points themselves, they like to highlight the oppression points of others, or the perceived oppression points. So we did have a massive push on pride, which at the time I thought was great. And I do think, I guess my views on pride have sort of changed throughout this whole journey of changing my beliefs. But at the time I did think it was good. But the school has like many schools, has a affirmative culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very much like, these people are a huge, they're a tiny marginalised minority, so we must do our utmost to make sure that they feel as comfortable as possible, whatever that means. I mean, I don't think we had any instance where it didn't go so far as males coming into female spaces, but that was because all of the students who identified as trans were female anyway.
Yes.
Which tends to be the case.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Do you think that's related to the fact that female teenagers struggle more with body image issues than males?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what girl grew up and went through puberty not disliking her body in some way or another? Yeah. It's just the new thing that young girls can sort of latch onto, whether, before it was predominantly eating disorders, and obviously lots of people who go down the path of gender ideology often suffer with eating disorders already, or it might have been self-harm, or, before that it might have been being emo or a goth or doing anything to be non-conforming to sort of channel their disillusion with mainstream society. But would you say that's similar to how you experienced stuff at school with girls?
Absolutely, yeah. It was very much girls who wanted to be alternate in some way. I think in a way, some of them looked for the pushback from teachers. So teachers that would say the name that was on the register rather than the name they wanted to use, they would really kick off about it. And I think they were sort of looking for that kind of conflict subconsciously. I do have a lot of sympathy for girls that are going through that. I think it's a really difficult thing for them to be facing, and I've really started to condemn the people that push them towards it. Obviously, some people think that they're doing the right thing in doing that, but I think it just causes them so much harm, and I think you've got to sometimes take the tough stance of saying, no, that's not right, don't do that to yourself, even if it upsets the young girls at the time. So when did that sort of attitude change for you?
Well, it was towards the end of my time at school, at the end of year 13, and during Pride Month, the school had a podcast, which is still on Spotify and you can still listen to it. I did an interview with a trans student in my year, and in that interview she was telling me that her life expectancy is now 30 because she's trans, and talking about the suicidality rates of trans people. And I left that interview thinking, wow, it was really emotional. And like you said, I had a lot of sympathy and thinking, God, this obviously is a really stressful and this person is distressed. Yeah. And I remember saying to another friend, it's just so strange because I thought as feminists, and I ran the feminist society at school with my friend, and I thought as feminists, we're trying to move away from gender stereotypes. So it's really sad that someone in this day and age should feel like that they don't fit into a category, so that means they have to actually move into a different one, however you do that. But also, if someone is saying that, why are we affirming that idea that in order for someone to be themselves, they have to sort of reject certain parts of their natural self?
Yes.
And so that was when the seed was planted in my head that this kind of seems regressive.
We hope you enjoyed this latest video from Vox Populi. To watch the full video for free, please check out our website, voxpopulimedia.com. Thank you for your support.